Well, hi there, tubers, tubettes, various crazy people. Title of this little video is going to be something to the effect of why I chose to live in Dumaguete when I moved to the Philippines, as opposed to some other city or town or island or barangay, whatever you want to call it. And the motivation for doing this little video has been from you guys. I've been contacted a lot recently via email, messenger on Facebook, comments on other videos, because apparently it's looking like the pandemic thing is, possibly going to come to a close. A lot of guys that have been chomping at the bit to come out here are not necessarily coming here to Dumaguete, but they are coming to the Philippines. And a lot of them have asked me, why do you live there? And so I thought that's a fair question. And let me give you a disclaimer. In 2 months, will mark my 4-year anniversary of living not only in the Philippines, but right here in little sleepy Dumaguete itself. So I've taken a few side trips in the meantime. In the last 4 years, I've gone out of the country twice to visit Vietnam and Indonesia. I've visited some neighboring islands, but I have not spent any real time there, 2-3 days at the most. So I cannot comment with any authority whatsoever about what it's like to live anywhere else. But I think after almost 4 years, I can pretty much give you a pretty decent appraisal, if you will, of Dumaguete itself. And I'll start off with why I chose Dumaguete. Prior to my retirement, in fact, way back in 2005, I took my first trip to Asia. And I came back from that trip a changed human being, completely different mindset about everything, just about everything, how I was going to live, the meaning of life, big questions that got answered, things that I never thought of came to the front of my, reptilian brain. And so I just knew way back in 2005 that eventually I was going to get old and crusty like I am now, and that I was going to retire somewhere in Asia. And I started to do research way back then. And I would do stuff like I would Google 10 best places to retire, safest places to retire, cheapest places to retire. And I would read articles written by various travel organizations. And sure enough, even way back then, Dumaguete seemed to always come up in the top 5 whenever it took me to the Philippines. And so about 3 years prior to coming out here, I started watching YouTube videos. And I watched about 10 different guys. And one guy lived in Naga, one guy lived in Manila, one guy lived in Makati, one guy lived in Mindanao, one guy lived, I think, in Iloilo, and 3 or 4 guys lived right here on Negros Oriental, which is the island that Dumaguete is situated in. And I had to ask myself, what are your priorities? What are you wanting to do here? And my number one, not concern, but my number one issue was budget. Number one, can I afford to take my Social Security check only and live off of it comfortably without having to worry about having a roof over my head or food in my stomach and transportation and all that happy stuff? And after watching, I don't know how many guys, I came to the conclusion, yes. There were 3 primary guys that I watched back in the day. One was Rike with Life Beyond the Sea. I watched Philippine Dreams with a guy named Ned. And I watched Bud Brown. And at the time, I forget what his channel was called. He keeps changing the name of it. Bud Brown in the Philippines. And these guys were all paying about $200 rent. I really appreciated their videos because every month they would do a budget video. Now, the numbers have changed, obviously, since then to now, inflation and all. It's more expensive as far as rent and stuff like that. But I got a pretty good bead, not by one guy, not by two guys, but by three, maybe four guys that were all pretty much saying the same thing. And I really loved their budget videos. And that's why every 3 or 4 months I try to do a budget video so I can share, what it costs for me to live here, if that in fact is your concern also. The other reason I chose the Philippines in general was because of the visa. You can come here, or I can come here for 3 years and just live for 3 years, just keep renewing my visa. In fact, I just came back from immigration a couple days ago. I paid some money and renewed it for a few more months. And then after 3 years, I realized I'm going to have to leave the country for at least 24 hours. I can come back in and start the process all over again. So that was, again, a major plus compared to other countries. How long can I stay there, and what's the hassle factor? So other things that I looked at was safety and availability and transportation. So safety. I can tell you that in the almost 4 years that I've lived here, I've never felt threatened or I've never felt like I'm not safe. And there's two different categories there. One would be by the people. If I've ever had any conflicts, it's been with foreigners. The locals were all cool. And weather. I was worried and concerned about things like tsunamis and typhoons that I heard about in other places. And Dumaguete just is situated in such a way that the typhoons pretty much miss us, and they go further north. In fact, May and I were in Cebu during the beginning of a typhoon, and we got stranded there for an extra day simply because there was a typhoon and we couldn't travel. The buses quit running. But over here in Dumaguete, we get the aftermath, if you will. We don't get the high winds. We don't get buildings blown down and devastation like you've seen when these monsters come across the ocean and hit land. But we will get buckets of rain. We have had bridges collapse and things like that because of so much rain. But again, not the craziness that you get with a full-blown typhoon. So there's safety, there's the budget, and then I wanted the accessibility. At the time when I moved over here, I was aware of 3 different hospitals, and I felt that was important. That hospitals be available, nearby, easy to get to, and affordable. I'm not impressed with the hospitals here, but that's a different video for a different time, which I'll probably do in the next few weeks. They had a mall. That, for some weird reason, was important to me. I wanted to be able to go to a mall. I knew it was going to be hot out here. And I know that a mall is a good refuge, if you will, to escape the heat and just kind of kill some time. And believe it or not, when I first moved here, my first year, I spent a hell of a lot of time at Robinson's Mall because I was getting acclimated to the heat and the weather. And it was kind of like, I don't know, a safe place to go. It was familiar, I think is the best way of putting it. And then there's variety. There's a lot of nature. I can be at a mall downtown with plenty of restaurants and the little accoutrements that I'm as a spoiled American used to. But I can get on my little gay-looking scooter and I can drive for 20, 25 minutes in any direction. And I can be out in the middle of almost nowhere with beautiful jungles and different scenery and rivers and waterfalls and all that kind of stuff. And in the 4 years, I've done my fair share of that. Beaches were a disappointment out here. They're very rocky. There's no real waves or anything like that that I experienced in other places, but that wasn't a deal breaker for me. And the good news is that there are areas here on the island that are primarily occupied by dive resorts. that do have some decent white sand beaches. They're kind of far and few between, but they do exist. And that's another little thing that I discovered after I got here, not prior to, was that what May and I really enjoy is the ability to just go to one of those dive resorts, check in and have a little staycation, if you will. What else was I going to tell you about? So we've covered it's safe, it's affordable, there's variety, there's hospitals, transportation. There is a bus line here that will take you, if you're on a budget and you want to go to Cebu, for example, you can ride the bus. There are jeepneys and trikes, not my favorite mode of transportation, but they're available and they're very affordable. And there's a little airport here. So if you want to get off and fly to Manila or Cebu, as opposed to taking a bus, you can. And last but not least, there's ferries. So if I want to take my gay-looking little scooter and go over to Siquijor or Cebu or Bohol or any other neighboring island, they don't go everywhere, but at least I can get there either with or without my own transportation. So I researched that, I found that to be true, and I feel very, very acclimated here. I feel very, very confident and comfortable. Dumaguete is, in my humble opinion, just what I was looking for, which was a retirement destination. I truly think that it's awesome for guys my age to live here. If I was 30 or 35, maybe not so much. I might want to be more in a Cebu area with some nightlife and more variety and more opportunities to meet women and stuff like that. So there's other places for other people, but for a guy my age, I really think that this is an awesome place to hang my hat. There's also, with the ferries, with the airplanes, with the buses, the opportunity to use it as home base. In other words, maybe I do want to travel later, which I do, and I want to go to this island, or I want to go to that town, or I want to go to a different country. I've got everything at my disposal in order to get there without having to go through a bunch of hoops. So that's pretty much it, boys and girls. I have found Dumaguete to be very good for a retired aged guy or woman to live here. There's not a lot of nightlife. There's not a lot of fancy places. It's limited in many ways. It's by far not Eden. It has its shortcomings. I've covered some of those in other videos. And I did a video not too long ago about what would I have done different. So if you're thinking about coming out here, specifically to Dumaguete, I would look up that video. I was going to redo it in a different style, and I still may, but it's kind of redundant, you know? So if you're coming out here, in that video, I kind of tell you the mistakes that I made prior to coming out here of what I didn't bring with me and what I would have done different to make the transition simpler. So anyway, it's good to see you all. I appreciate all the new subscribers, and I will be chatting with you guys about some other topics that I think you're going to have an interest in also. Okay, I'll see you on the next video. Bye.